Hi, I'm Mike Ryan. Turquoise really has only one commercial application, and that's for use in jewelry. And it's most closely associated with Native American jewelry. Turquoise is also collected on its own, but there is a synergy between the jewelry and the turquoise. In many instances, it's a chicken and egg situation. Someone becomes interested in Native American jewelry, they see the beautiful turquoise, and that interest in turquoise grows. For others, they just develop a passion for turquoise, and that leads them to the Native American jewelry. There are a lot of different ways to collect turquoise. Some of the largest collections have started out with turquoise lovers just collecting a lot of turquoise, and that leads them into becoming turquoise dealers. One of these is the king of turquoise, Ernie Montoya, who has SunWest Silver. So he has a natural connection between the turquoise he collects and the Indian jewelry that he sells. Bob Ruscha put together one of the finest collections I've ever seen, the Nevada Gem Collection, which you can see in Jewel of the Southwest. It's an out-of-print book, but if you can get a copy, it's really well worth it. Amazing book. And he gravitated towards being a turquoise dealer. Another person in this category would be Michael Magui. Eric Runquist has been in that situation, as has Rob Stapp. Others of us just collect the turquoise itself. Now, there can be different focuses to a collection. When I first started collecting, I just knew I loved it. I wanted to buy turquoise. There was no rhyme nor reason to what I was collecting. But eventually I began to focus my attention. Part of that became because I wanted to learn how to cut turquoise, and I started buying rough. Well, when you buy rough and you cut it, your collection's going to expand, but the level of grade is going to vary greatly. So I decided I really wanted to focus more on higher grade and from well-known mines. Now, part of that has to do with provenance. Provenance is the source of ownership. You're spending this money on this turquoise, you want to make darn sure that what you're getting is correct, is authentic. And really the only way with turquoise you can be certain is to buy it from the miner, buy it from somebody who bought it from the miner, or buy it from a reputable dealer who bought it from either of the previous two. My focus was on grade and the well-known mines. Another newer collector, Mark Babst, has decided to try to accumulate the widest number of much less known mines. And I think to date he has over 250 examples from different turquoise mines. Of course, when you chose to go that route, your question of provenance becomes much more challenging. So let's take a look at some examples of some large turquoise cabs, which is also a focus of my attention, and an example of how the turquoise led me to a piece of jewelry. So I hope you enjoy this video on turquoise collecting. Well, here we're looking at a selection of very large cabs. Now, sometimes it's difficult to get a relative sense of size without some form of comparison. For instance, if I put my hand in there, you would have an idea of what the size is. But I'm going to give you a listing of what these weights are, as well as where the turquoise is from. We're going to start up here in this corner, and we're going to go around in a counterclockwise fashion. This is a Chinese cab that I bought. I purchased the rough from Yuki Wang, so I'm very comfortable with its provenance. Then we go down here, that's 252 carats. We go down here, and this is Thunder Mountain. Now, Thunder Mountain is in Esmeralda County. It's in the vicinity of the old Easter Blue claim. And I bought this from Greg Fink, and he was working on shares with Shreve Savelle at the Thunder Mountain claim. And this is a nice big 275 carat. And Thunder Mountain is a relatively newer claim. I think it really came online, one of the Ottoson claims, in probably the 60s or 70s, but it has really only been mined more recently. Down here we have a really interesting piece. I got this rough from Rob Stapp, and this is a Ithaca Peak. And we can see some of the characteristic pyrite here in the piece. Now this is getting into what I call a specicab area. It's kind of a hybrid between a cut cabochon and a finished specimen piece of rough. 363 carats. Over here we have Bisbee, 256 carats. And this was interesting. You know, you buy your rough, you really don't know what you're going to get. You cut into that and see what you end up. In this instance, I just took the nugget and finished out the entire nugget. And, you know, I came out with some really beautiful blue here, but, you know, not a lot of turquoise in there, but certainly very representative of Bisbee color. And we see this wonderful granite matrix in there. When we come over here, we have a really spectacular piece of blue gem at 251 carats. And we see this really beautiful, typical color with that lighter brown matrix often associated with blue gem. Moving up here, a really nice big cab of Hidden Valley with the gem grade characteristic of that green tint in the background. And then we have this granite, and of course, maybe you can see here a little sparkle of some pyrite included in that. Here is some of the highest grade of Godber that I've ever seen, 237 carats. And this stuff is just as rare as you're ever going to find. I think Bruce Woods told me he ended up, and this was probably, 4 or 5 years ago that this came on the market, and there were only 3,000 carats of this grade that came to market. And Bruce has not found anything to compare with this since then. These are two really exceptional cabs of number 8, and the story of the provenance is included in a blog article that we have on the website. And I'd really encourage you to read that, give you a real sense of how important provenance is for the turquoise collector. We can see in all these instances, I followed the rule of provenance where you either buy it from the miner, buy it from someone who bought it from the miner, or from a reputable dealer who bought from either of the previous two. So the story on this is really fascinating, and I encourage you all to read that. A really spectacular example of the red web of number 8 with this really quite astounding turquoise pattern in there, this web pattern. And of course the size. These certainly came from one nugget, and this one here on the right, 295 carats, and on the left, 321 carats. Finally, we end up here in the center with this wonderful big 490 carat cab of Royston. Now, this came from the Lynn Ottoson collection. He had it for many years. It was actually quite a bit bigger than this, but Danny Ottoson dropped the piece and it broke, and so we end up with this 490 carat, but really spectacular. This very spectacular kind of royal blue color included in there with a very traditional Royston matrix. So this gives you an example of how a collector may choose to focus on larger cabochons, and that every type of collecting is going to pose its own challenges. If you want to collect a lot of the small obscure mines, getting provenance is going to be a real challenge. If you want to focus on the best grade of the well-known mines, well, you got to have the budget to accomplish that. And of course, this is just collecting the turquoise itself. We'll take a look now at when the Indian jewelry comes into being part of your collecting process. You know, for turquoise lovers, there's a chicken and egg relationship between the jewelry and the turquoise. As I mentioned, for some, their interest in turquoise begins with the jewelry, and then they develop a love for turquoise. For others, it's the turquoise that leads them to the jewelry. In this instance, this is an amazing necklace made by Larry Golsch. And Larry first started his career back in the 1970s and has remained one of the most famous and well-respected Native American jewelers in the business. And here we see this, I mean, the workmanship on this heishi, this turquoise heishi, is just astounding. I can't imagine how you get that so small like that. But what really led me to this piece of jewelry was this piece of turquoise. This is Indian Mountain, and it is in what I consider the highest grade. Some would say it's the dark web, but I think this blue on this red web background is really the highest grade of Indian Mountain. So that's really what led me to this, and fortunately, the price was right. You know, none of this is what we're going to be considered cheap in terms of price. But understand this, turquoise in general, especially natural high-grade turquoise, is very undervalued. And price is a factor of the marketplace, and value is much more attuned to the cost of production. And high-grade, gem-grade natural turquoise is among the rarest of all gemstones. And it is so costly for miners to go out because it just doesn't occur very often. And they dig and dig and dig and have all this fixed expense and seldom find this sort of high grade. So what we end up happening and what distorts the sense of value is that you have a two-tier marketplace where stabilized chalk, turquoise, dominates the marketplace. And when you compare a $1 or $2 carat, very pretty stabilized turquoise, compared to someone asking $15, $20, $30 or more per carat for the natural high grade, very high grade, and gem grade, the market there just isn't enough demand in place to raise the price to where it would really reflect what its true value is. And as an example, I give this example I've given many times, that in 1905, as published in Joseph Pogue in his famous monograph, Turquoise, he said the average price for high-grade turquoise was $15 a carat. Well, that translates to about $300 or so today. And I ask you, where else can you find something that is priced so far below what the market was carrying in 1905? It's a third of the price today, if you're paying $100 a carat for that. So it can seem expensive, but unless people decide they no longer like turquoise and the demand just stops, I just don't see how we can't see higher prices for this very high-grade natural turquoise, because people have had this love affair with turquoise for over 5,000 years, and I don't think it's going to stop anytime soon.